Hello everybody, welcome back to Daily Deco. In today's show I'm just going to go over some of the sort of recent news stories that kind of piqued my interest this week and sort of answer a few of your questions. So this weekend was actually the very first Scuba Digital of the industry. It was a digital dive show, which is something that we'd never really seen before. I logged on for sort of a few of the things just to sort of have a look around, and it was quite interesting. It was I don't think it's the way that dive shows are going to be sort of in the future. I don't think this is it. This is what we're going to do, but it's definitely an interesting alternative and something that we can do because at the moment dive shows. Or sort of previously, pre-COVID, dive shows were always, for me, this kind of expo where you can kind of go and see all the sort of new and sort of interesting dive equipment, actually sort of physically see it all sort of in one place, and you have these expos of these sort of experts talking about sort of whatever. And this one, it was very much sort of aimed at entry-level divers, sort of beginner divers who sort of didn't really know very much. So if you wanted to learn about this, that, or the other, you could just kind of click on this almost kind of Zoom presentation, and you could just sort of watch someone at your leisure, and it was very clever because it's very unobtrusive. You didn't have to drive or fly and go sort of to a certain destination and spend an entire day or two kind of doing this. You could literally just kind of pop in and pop out. Sort of for me, beforehand, I went through all of the different sessions that I sort of had an interest in, and you could click a button and it would literally add a alert to your calendar, and then on the Saturday and the Sunday, my phone would buzz and would say, "Oh, this is about to start." You push a little button and then it takes you straight to it. So it was very, very convenient. So whilst I'm like doing the dishes, I can be watching someone talk about sort of ghost gear fishing and whatnot. So it was very interesting. I don't think it's going to replace the sort of the physical dive shows when the world is all back up and running. I imagine we'll go back to more of a sort of a physical dive show again, just to show the sort of new dive equipment, because that's primarily what I'm interested in. You can usually find these kind of sort of blogs and videos online talking about all these different sort of aspects about scuba diving almost year round, whilst it is nice to have a live presentation and they can sort of answer some of your questions, because that was another thing. You had a little chat bar down one side, so people watching could just sort of ask a question there and then sometimes the presenter would answer them. But it was very clever. There were a few little glitches for some people that I noticed. A few people complaining that they lost sound or they lost picture or something. I think that a lot of that's down to the kind of the software behind it. You had to use a certain browser, which was the best, and sort of bandwidths and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think the physical dive show will ever kind of disappear and be replaced by this, but I think this is a nice sort of auxiliary, a secondary sort of dive show that you can sort of see. So that was quite interesting. In the news, I saw sort of three stories that have sort of caught my eye. The first one is a very rare diver's watch is going up for sale, and this is a old Omega Seamaster 300, and this was issued to a British military diver back in, when was it, 1974? And very few of these were ever made by Omega for the military, and it was between 1967 and 1970 that they were created, and then they were issued to their divers. And this chap, he's had a fascinating career as a military diver, who actually helped raise the Mary Rose in the Solent, and that was in 1982. So he's had this watch for years and years, and he's logged so many hours of sort of dive time with it. And at a certain point, when it kind of broke, the military basically told him, like, right, well, give it back. I can't remember whether they'll destroy it or whatever. But he actually said, "Oh well, no, tell you what, can I keep it if I can get it sort of serviced?" They said, yeah, fine, whatever. He was in Germany at the time, and he managed to, after a while, he found a watchmaker or something who could repair it, and they did, and he's kept it ever since. And he said that he was watching some documentary or something, and he saw that someone had a Rolex dive watch, a vintage one, and that sold at auction for a lot of money. And he thought, oh hey, I'll see how much mine is worth. And he went to an auction house, and they said that that this watch was worth an estimated £20,000 to £30,000. So he's like, oh, this is a nice little nest egg. So he's decided to put it up with, for auction, with a lot of his sort of diving records and stuff, which is very, very cool, and a certificate about how he was. He helped raise the Mary Rose, and yeah, so that's going up for auction. Hopefully he's going to put a lot of money towards his grandchildren, I think, just to make their lives a little bit easier, and hopefully he's going to make it out to Australia and dive the Great Barrier Reef. So that's a cool story. I do like sort of vintage dive watches, and yeah, this one you can see it's seen a few years, but no, that's very cool. The next story comes from I think this is in Florida, and it's basically their sanctuary staff, because there's a sanctuary off. Was it the Florida Keys? Yeah, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary staffers have not been allowed to scuba dive since COVID. And they have this protected area out in the waters, and it's marked out by different buoys and stuff, and they haven't been able to do anything during the COVID lockdown. Well, that's a lie. They've done a few bits and bobs, but they've not been allowed to go sort of under the water. They said they've done a few bits and bobs to sort of buoys, sort of with snorkels and from boats, but if anything's sort of needed to be done under the water, they just couldn't do it. But now they're sort of opening up the floodgates, for lack of a better word, to sort of allow these sort of researchers to go back into the water, because they haven't been able to do any kind of surveys that they had planned, anything sort of under the water. So the divers themselves, they're going through sort of medical checks to make sure that they're all fit and healthy, and of course that they do their COVID tests. They also have to bring their own scuba diving equipment. This seems to be a sort of fairly common clause in a lot of sort of diving travel nowadays, where basically, yeah, you can come, but you can't sort of rent gear. You kind of have to bring your own equipment because, well, yeah, communicable disease. If you're sort of handing things that especially go in your mouth and around your face, no, bring your own. And that's their main sort of thing. And yeah, they can start getting back into the water, doing their surveys, because they do a lot of things where sort of if there's been a sort of a boat strike, if a boat has kind of hit the reef in a particular area, they have to assess the damage and sort of assess that. But they also have to sort of monitor fish species and all that kind of stuff in key areas in this marine protected reserve, and they just haven't been able to for so many months. So they have no real idea what changes have sort of happened in the water, because yeah, we've had sort of, I presume, lesser sort of boat travel, lesser fishing and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they're quite interested and keen to get back into the water and really kind of see sort of how things have changed. And the third story is a bit more autonomous. This is an unmanned underwater vehicle, little ROV, has passed a certain test. And so this is a UK-based sort of robot team, and they've designed this to be a sort of autonomous robot, so it doesn't actually need a pilot. It can kind of map and navigate all by itself, which is very, very clever. Whilst they do have it tethered during the tests, there's a separate, I think it's the University of Manchester. Yeah, so they're developing a wireless underwater communication system which will effectively eliminate that tether, so you can just eventually put this robot in the water and it will just tell it to do a job, and it will just go off, do its thing, map everything out. So yeah, I mean, years and years ago, I forget who I was talking to, but he said the future of like sort of commercial diving is just ROVs. So don't even bother getting people in the water, because yeah, eventually in so many years' time, there's just going to be a robot that's going to do it, and that makes life a lot safer, because they can go to sort of more contaminated sites, more sort of dangerous sites where we don't have to send divers, and yeah, now they're becoming more and more autonomous. So sort of very clever, and effectively, I know they're replacing divers, which isn't really a good thing for the industry, but it's also a good thing, because we're not putting them into sort of harm's way, places where they could possibly sort of harm themselves. So I think next spring, it has like a phase 2 trial where they kind of put it through its tests, sort of again do sort of more things. But yeah, underwater ROVs, and especially autonomous sort of ROVs, because most of them at the moment, they're just controlled by a guy with a sort of PlayStation controller, and it's very much that's it. But now the robot's kind of doing itself. So yeah, that seems to be the future that we now live in. Moving on to your questions. So the first one comes from, oh, I'm sorry about your name, Bojasim Al-Katan, and he simply asks, will you restock the site? Yes. So yeah, if you go to simplyscuba.com, it's going to look sort of fairly bare at the moment. There is a few bits and bobs that are in stock. There's a few reasons for this. The first one is that basically when we changed companies, of course, we had to sort of reset all of the sort of partner contracts, effectively working with all the different companies, and some companies take a little bit slower than others. So yeah, that's the first reason. The second reason is that with Internet Fusion Group, and now sort of ultimately Simply Scuba, obviously, we're much more eco-conscious, and a lot of scuba diving equipment sort of comes in plastic bags, and there's a lot of single-use plastic packaging, which of course we all despise, and what Simply Scuba does now, instead of just passing that on to the consumer and then they hopefully dispose of it responsibly, actually Internet Fusion is going to take over, and we're going to so everything that sort of comes in, we assess it. It has a traffic light kind of system based on sort of how bad it is, and yeah, any sort of single-use plastics or sort of annoying sort of plastic packaging, we actually remove, we dispose of it responsibly, and then we replace that packaging with something a bit more sort of eco-friendly. So that takes a bit of time. So eventually, yeah, you'll start to see stuff sort of popping back into stock if you sort of keep an eye on the website. And in forthcoming daily decos, yeah, that's what we'll be sort of discussing. So if you get sort of a new big batch of, I don't know, Fourth Element, whatever, then we'll say, hey, this has arrived. So yeah, if you've been waiting for something, then yes, it. If you watch these videos, we'll tell you when it comes back into stock. The next question comes from Anthony Tartar, and this is from one of the YouTube videos. This was sort of best inland dive sites, or sort of inside dive sites, and he asked, where's the location in the first picture? So I imagine he's asking about the thumbnail. The thumbnail is actually Nemo 33. So that is in Brussels, and yeah, that's a very smart dive centre. I've been there quite a few times. It's inside, and it's completely fresh water, and it's nice and warm as well. So you just need like a rash vest and board shorts. And the way they've laid it out is very, very clever. So you have 5 meter section, which is just like a basic square pool, and then underneath that, sort of either side, it's hard to explain, but if you go to their website, I'm sure you'll see a map of it somewhere. Either side of that, it goes sort of further down to 10 meters. Again, just a sort of pretty square basic swimming pool, but there you actually have a window that goes through to the sort of bar and restaurant next door, which is quite cool. So as you're swimming around, sort of people just having their dinner, can sort of wave and all that kind of stuff. You have an underwater cave system, which is underneath the 5 meter system, where you can poke your head up, and there's a couple air pockets. One is themed a bit like a submarine, the other one I think is just an underwater cave, and yeah, you can stand up. The water levels up to about your chest. You can take your regulator out and you can sort of talk to people. So that under pressure is a little bit weird. Yeah, and then if you kind of continue to swim through, then there's this big tunnel that goes straight down to 33 meters, and yeah, that's quite cool. But one thing that I'd recommend is that you go sort of down to the deepest section first, because by the time that more and more people come down there with you, all of their exhaust bubbles start to rise up through this chamber, and it effectively blocks the light, so it gets pretty dark down there pretty quick, because of all of those bubbles just kind of refracting and whatever it is to the light. So yeah, if you get down there really quick, you can kind of explore. There's not a great deal to see. There's just that sort of compass needle, but it is more just the experience of being 33 meters down, sort of inside a swimming pool, and then you can slowly work your way sort of back up, and then you can explore the caves and all that kind of stuff. Last time I was there, they sunk a smart car, which is quite cool. They ripped all the seats and the electrics and all that kind of stuff out of it, but you can still open the doors and kind of get inside if you were small enough. And yeah, it's just something different just to yeah, mix it up, because after that it's effectively just a really big swimming pool. And the final question comes from Anthony Worthington on the Cressy Digi2 SPG. And he says, I've been thinking about buying a Digi2 for some time. Just a quick one. Does it tell you your decompression stops? So no. This is where the Digi2 kind of confuses people, because it looks a lot like just an air integrated dive computer that's attached onto a hose that you attach to your regulator, but actually Digi2 is not a computer in sort of that sense of the word. All it is just a digital submersible pressure gauge, or SPG. All it does is it measures your tank pressure, your depth, your sort of maximum and I think average depth, and it might do airtime remaining. I can't remember. I can't promise that. But yeah, it does nothing to do with sort of tissue loading or decompression stops or anything. It's simply just a pressure gauge. So you will need a separate dive computer to monitor some nitrogen loading and all that kind of stuff. But it is very different. I've only ever seen analog sort of pressure gauges, and then you get the digital ones that connect to either a dive computer or a wireless air transmitter. You don't tend to see purely digital pressure gauges. I think the Digi2 is one of the first, if not the first. It's the first that I've sort of known from a sort of big brand. I haven't seen sort of any others around in my years. But no, it's not a dive computer, and it's not going to measure your decompression stops or anything. And that's it for today. Obviously, if you have any comments, questions, queries, or even corrections, let us know on any of our social media platforms. Obviously, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So yeah, if you have anything that you don't really know what that noise is. But yeah, if you have anything that you wanted to know, let us know in any of the comments, or of course you can send us direct messages. We'll get hold of those. We'll often sort of type the response back to you so that you know kind of then and there, so that way you don't have to watch tomorrow's show. But yeah, we'll elaborate a little bit better in these sort of videos. And one day you might even see Sean again. He's off gallivanting, sort of doing exciting filming stuff. So yeah, it's just myself in my dive locker for the next few days. Yeah, thank you for watching, everybody, and safe diving.